Hey y'all loadsters. If you don't know what load means, it stands for Layout a Day. And this is hosted by scraphappy.org. It is a challenge to create a layout a day for a month. If you are a member of Scrap Happy, you are automatically enrolled in these challenges, or if you aren't a member, you can enroll in them separately. So I had volunteered to be a featured designer for one of the days of this challenge, and when I got my challenge in email and read it, I was like, uh-oh, what am I gonna do with this? And I panicked just for a second because nothing popped into my head automatically as to, oh, I know what I'm gonna do, which is kind of the whole point of, for me, it's kind of the whole point of this load event is to challenge you to kind of think outside the box or think a little bit differently than how you normally would. So what I thought I would do was go over the prompt and my thought process that went behind the prompt. And then I'm just going to kind of go through the steps of creating the layout. That's the plan anyway. But for today's challenge, when I read it, the first thing I thought about was, okay, movies. A character in a movie that I could relate to. Well, like I said, nothing popped into my head, and I was thinking about it, and I haven't watched a lot of movies lately, and I do have some favorite movies, so I thought about those, and I thought about the reason why I liked them, and it really wasn't related to a character. It was more the whole storyline. So I moved on from that and said, well, let me look at books. And so I started thinking about the books I'd read recently, because I read just about every day, even if it's for 10, 15 minutes. I've always been a big book reader, and it's just one of the things I enjoy doing. So I thought, well, let me just think back to the last few books that I've read about some of the characters in those books. And the last book that I read was The Lilac Girls, and it's about a women's concentration camp. And I thought about the characters, and they were evil characters, of course, and there were strong women characters, but none of them really struck a chord with me. The book was great, but character-wise, none of them really stuck with me. And then, so I thought about the book I read before that, and it was called In a Dark, Dark Wood, and that was more of a suspense type book. It was good also, but I thought about the characters in that, and there were some weak women characters, a couple of male characters in it, and a devious evil character. And I couldn't think of anything that I could relate to with that. And then I thought about the book I read before that, was Station 11, and it was about a virus that had came and wiped out the majority of the population, and the people that were left were just trying to survive. So of course they were strong characters, and it was about a band of musicians slash actors that went around from town to town to kind of entertain people and spread news as to what was going on. And it was a good book too, but I just couldn't think of anything that I could relate to as far as a character in a book. So then I went back and I looked at the quote, the Dr. Seuss quote. It said, and you can find magic wherever you look. Sit back and relax. All you need is a book. And I got to thinking about Dr. Seuss, and then that reminded me I have a big stack of books that my sister had that belonged to both me and my sister when we were growing up. of children's books that she had them for my niece and nephew when they were little. And they were moving, so we had like a little yard sale together. And she was going to get rid of those books. And me being, you know, the sentimental person that I am, I'm like, oh no, those books aren't going. I'm bringing them all home with me. And so I put them upstairs in a bookshelf with my books that I have on my to be read list. And so that quote got me thinking about those books. And then I remembered a book in particular. And I remember when we looked through those books, my sister and I looked through those books, she said, oh, I love this book. And I said, I did too. And it's not a Dr. Seuss book, but it is a book by the Weekly Readers Children's Book Club. And it was published in, I think it was, 1971. And it is called Christina Katerina and the Box. Now, this was a book that I could relate to the character Christina. And not only could I relate to the character Christina, but Christina's mother reminded me of my mom. So I had my layout. So if it weren't for this prompt, I would have never thought about this. I would have never come up with this. It was a challenge, and I'm glad I was challenged, because I certainly didn't want to just do the technique prompt. I wanted to do the prompt justice, especially as, you know, being featured for that day. I wanted to use the story prompt, and I'm so glad I gave it the time and molded over and kind of worked it out in my head throughout the day. That was kind of the process I went through, to work it out. But I just wanted to share that with you, that if you don't see or come up with the idea right off the top of your head, just kind of mull it over a little bit and break it down into pieces, and something will come. Because I thought, I don't want to have to email Alice and say, you know, I volunteered to do this and I can't think of anything, so I can't. That wasn't an option. So I really took the challenge to heart, and I'm glad that I did. So now that I had my layout idea in mind, the next thing I did was to take a few pictures. Then I battled with my printer. As you can see, I think it's on its last leg. It's a Picture Mate, and I just bought an ink cartridge for it, and I've still got a huge stack of paper left, because you get the cartridge and 100 pieces of photo paper, and it's already telling me it's low on ink, and it kept cutting off on me. You can see down here where it cut off. You can see there where it cut off. You can see there where it cut off. So I finally got it to print, and because it's low, well, it started, I don't know if you can see that little line right there. And putting the lines in it because it's, low on ink. But I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go with it because the book is old. It's about my childhood. So the pictures don't have to be perfect. So I'm just going with these pictures. So once I got my pictures printed, the next thing I did was to decide on what papers I was going to use. Okay, so for my papers I'm going to use, one of my goals this year was to use up some of my older kits that I had. So I pulled out some of my 2014 Cocoa Daisy kits. This is from September, May, February, October, and July of 2014. And I kind of got an idea of what the color palette I want to use. I pulled a few of these papers out that are possibilities. Thought that was really cute because it's got library cards. And there's the word magic, and magic is something you make. So I'm just going to use some of these papers, and when I come back, we'll get started on working on the layout. Okay, prior to this, you should have seen a picture that I got off of Pinterest, and it's the layout that I'm going to scrap lift. I don't design my own pages. I'm not good at it. If I tried, I could, but it would take me way too long. I would just sit there and shuffle pictures around in paper. So I like to have the starting point either by scrap lifting somebody else's layout or a sketch. But I'm going to show you how I came up with my grid. I started with this 12 by 12 piece of cardstock, and on the layout it has 3 squares to work in. So basically what I did was I took I used my cutter board because it's got the ruler up top and a straight edge. So I measured in, I lined my paper up with my edge on this side, so I'm at my 12 inches, and basically what I did was measure in every 2.5 inches, and then I just used a ruler and made sure, you know, my paper, I've already cut my paper, so I just made sure my paper was, you know, butted up against the straight edge, and then I did my measurement at 2.5 inches, and then I took my pencil and I just made a mark, a light pencil line, and then I did it every 2.5 inches, and then when I got to this end, you'll end up with 2 inches for this block, because you got 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, and 2, which gives you your 12 inches. So basically what I did was on this side where I had my 2.5 inches, I cut 1/2 inch off, and then I flipped my page and did the exact same thing. So I have 12 inches on this side. I measured in 2.5 inches, drew my lines, and then I cut 1/2 inch off of the 2.5 inch side. So now I have in the middle I have my blocks. They're 2.5 by 2.5, and on the outer edges I have 2 inches. And if you can see a close-up of it, it's kind of like a tree pattern, and you can also see my grids that I drew. And we're going to go back and erase these after we're done, the lines that you can still see. But since this is about a book and trees make paper, paper makes books, I thought that would be cute for the background, just a little subtle design. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is some hand stitching, and I'm just going to kind of go over real quick how I make my pattern. This is, I don't know where I got it from, Walmart, Target, something. It's a trivet like you can set a hot bowl down on. It's corkboard on this side, and it's got a hard surface on the back, and it's a pretty good size, so it makes a nice tool to put under a piece of paper when you are going to be poking holes. And I have this ruler, and I'm going to use, I believe, this right here, this straight stitch. This is a close to my heart ruler. And so basically what I'm going to do is line this up on my lines, and then I've got my cork underneath, and I'm going to take my tool to punch holes, whatever tool. I have some of those Amy Tangerine ones also. I don't know where they're at. You can use anything that's sharp to poke a hole with, or a push pin, whatever works for you. And I'm just going to go on my lines, and I'm going to start poking holes. I'm not going to do that on camera. But I wanted to say, if you don't have a guideline to make holes for stitching, you don't really need that. You can just freehand it. I've done that too. It's not really noticeable that your stitches aren't exactly even. So give it a try. You don't have to have any special tools to do it. You can just do it freehand with a needle or anything that's got a sharp point to it. So I'm gonna do that and come back, and then we'll do a little bit of stitching. Okay, I thought I'd do a little demo of doing stitching on your layout. I was gonna do it on my actual 12 by 12 paper, but I figured it'd be too hard to flip it back and forth on camera, so I just got a scrap piece of paper, and I've already got my holes punched. And what you need is a needle and some thread. You can use like embroidery floss. I did want to show you, this is a different kind of floss. You can't unwind it, but like the DMC or the Anchor floss on your strands, it actually turns into six different threads. So you can use all 6, you can use 2, you can use 3, you can use 4. So I just wanted to explain that. And then the needle, you either want to get a cross stitch needle or a tapestry needle, because they don't have the pointy ends that's gonna prick your finger. You know, of course you can prick your finger, but just by doing this, you know, it's not hurting or anything, because some needles have very sharp tips and you can poke yourself quite a bit. So we're just going to do a basic back stitch, and once you've got your holes punched, you're going to start out on the back side of your paper, and you're going to go into the first hole. And I'm kind of doing this kind of awkward so I can show you. Okay, so you'll pull your needle through, and you're going to leave a tail. Now, either your tail, you can use a piece of washi or the double-sided sticky tabs, and just don't pull the sticky off the one tab to kind of anchor this down. Or you can, if you leave a long enough tail, you can actually, like when you cross stitch your needle point, you can work it into your stitching. So you have your tail, and you pulled your thread up the first hole, and then you're going to go down the second hole and pull. Now don't like jerk it, because then you can rip your paper. You know, depending on the thickness of your paper, you don't have to be real gentle, but you know, you'll get the feel for it. So once you've gone down, you've got your first back stitch, then you're going to come up into the next hole. And I am going to, let me get this untwisted so you can see. Oh, I got it. There. I'm going to work this little tail. And it can be fiddly sometimes. That's wanting to, there. Can get a little fiddly. Okay. So now I'm going to go into the next available hole, and see how I've just got kind of my tail laid over that. So when I pull it through, hold on, I got to flip my glasses on. When I kind of pull it through, it's going to pull it down so it doesn't come unloose. So now you're up through the 1, 2, 3rd hole, and then you're going to go back down into the 2nd hole and pull your thread. Then you're going to come back up that 3rd hole again, And then you're going to go into the 4th hole. Because if you come back up the 4th hole, you're going to undo the stitch you just made. So now you're going to go down into the 5th hole. And see, I'm still kind of working that tail in. I hope you can see this okay. And then you're going to go back up. And that's what you're going to do the length of your back stitch. It's pretty simple. And once you get the hang of it, it goes pretty quickly. And there you have your nice little back stitch. And there you go. And that's what the back of it looks like. You'll have this gap here. That's just the tail showing, but that's your simple back stitch. You can make a zigzag pattern. You know, it's the same process, but it's not complicated at all. If you want to give it a try, just start out with a few little lines on your paper. So that's that, and I just wanted to show you where I was at so far on the progress of my layout that I'm working on. And see, there's the back side of the stitching. And I'm just going to take some, oh, I got to zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to take some, the double-sided adhesive squares. These mounting squares. Let me pull one off. I got it right here. I'm going to pull it off. And I'm just going to pull that and just tack it down. And I'm going to leave that backing on it so it's not sticky on that side. So here is my layout in progress that I'm working on. And I'm pretty much, you know, doing a basic scrap lift off of the picture that I showed earlier, but I just wanted to share my progress so far. I've got to think about my journaling, and I've actually got to make space for my journaling. So I'm going to do it in the various blocks. But I think this is probably going to go right here. And this one here. And maybe this photo down here. And that's going to be it for my pictures. But I'm just kind of working on it one block at a time. And if you can see, I got my red and white stripe in. And I've also used the word magic. Reading is magic. But that's not my title. My title's going to go up here. So when I come back, you should see a completed layout. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, if you didn't want to do stitching and you want to do a grid, you can use washi tape to make your grid. You can actually draw stitching lines if you want to, or you can take a ruler. Okay, so I'm back with my finished layout, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. As you can see, it's pretty much a scrap lift from the earlier photo that I showed. And I was really tickled that I only got to tell one story, but two. I got to tell a story about a favorite book that I had when I was a little girl. And also I got to tell the story of the egg carton that my mom likes to bring up on occasion. So the prompt enabled me to tell two different stories on one layout. And what I would suggest is, if you have a little bit of problem with the prompt or nothing pops into your head right away, is to go to a sketch or a scrap lift so you can spend more time of your process thinking about what you want to do, and then go to your sketch and you can get your layout done pretty quickly. Or if an idea pops into your head right away, you can spend more time coming up with your own design. Thanks for watching. Happy loading!